part of it depends on who benefits, right? So even if we think about, if we go back to the idea of like Reconstruction and you ask like what kinds of forms of power did formerly enslaved people gain access to? They gained access to their state legislatures. And I mean, people were voting, right? They got access to the ballot. They got access to decision-making, got access to schools and education. And all of those are forms of power. One of the things that they did not gain access to were guns, right? And so that was the one thing that folks decided to use against them.
That's what we have. Yeah.
Right? They also didn't have access to land. And so if we think about Jim Crow, if we think about sharecropping and how that was reinstated, is because people didn't have that form of power. And so a lot of it is about, a lot of this is about like creating the kind of conditions in society that levels the playing field in terms of like power and access to power. And I think once you begin to do that, it gives people the opportunity to think about and think about grace as something that works in their interest. And so, because again, and it's a kind of slippery slope, like if you show up with a pistol and I show up with a pistol, it becomes a question, are we dealing with each other out of safety and security? Because either one of us could get shot, or is it grace? At least it raises that question. If only one of us has it,
it's not a choice.
It's not even a question, right? So for me, the interaction and the behaviors are important to saying like, you know what, both of us have these pistols and we show up and we talk to each other. Whether we talk to each other as an action out of fear or whether it was out of grace, at the end of the day, we can walk away and say, this guy didn't shoot me. And you can say, I didn't shoot him. And we talked it out. That's a possibility that says, well, you know what I can do as a human being? I can talk.
Yeah.
That's a gift that humans have, right?
It's an option now. Yeah.
It's an option.
Well, I heard you talk about this on a prior podcast. You talked about the importance of humility. And I think that comes in here so importantly because just using that analogy you're given, right? Let's bring it back to Reconstruction and Klu Klux Klan and all that. So white people have the guns, black people don't. And what you're saying is like, if we create an even environment, now we have a better situation. Now take those white people with the guns. Humility becomes so important because I would imagine that some of those white people are saying, whether they're saying it consciously or not, I think the logic holds that they must be saying, I don't trust you with the guns. I don't think you're gonna play right with me with the guns. I like my current position. I'm comfortable. I feel safe. I feel secure. In theory, if I give you a gun and we both have guns, it should play out the way we just said. But there's not enough humility in this case in those white people or whoever it might be to believe that other people can be trusted. I trust myself with the gun. I know I'll do the right thing. But if I give them guns, now they have a say in it. Like I can't trust them. And that unbelievable arrogance to believe, like, I know I'm handling this the right way. I'm using my power the right way. That's the most dangerous thing because that allows you to convince yourself of like, I have to do this because I have to protect myself against them who aren't reasonable and whoever the them might be. In most cases, as we're talking about, it's black people, but it could be any different group that's, marginalized or what have you. And I think that humility to do that is so important. But again, it seems like it goes against human nature. To choose humility, to choose grace when you're in a position of power almost seems illogical from a very base level. As you evolve more, you see the value of it, but it's right back to that same dilemma, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of it is just people in positions not having the experience, right? Because again, if you would sit down and if you were able to have that conversation, it gives you a particular human experience and a human interaction that then becomes a template and a blueprint for how you can interact with other people. And if you can, and like you say, if people are in positions of power, why would they try that out? And so the conditions have to be such that you try it out.
And then you get to see the results that it works. And then you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Decoteau, as we're coming towards the end, which is so there's this concept that I grapple with a ton, and I'm going to ask it in a very blunt way that hopefully you appreciate in the spirit of what we're just talking about. But I think it's really, really important. And it ties right to the concept of grace. I think you touched on it before. There's this idea, I would say, of like breaking the cycle to allow grace to actually come in, because it's really the people, as we're just talking about, that are in that position of power that really arguably have to start the flywheel. Because if they show grace when they don't have to, now maybe you start to create the momentum that allows us to flourish. Mm-hmm. And we can make a strong argument, and I don't think many people would debate it, that over the history of America, there's been a shitload of missed opportunities where white people, let's just call it what it is, had an opportunity to show grace, and we didn't, for various different reasons like we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So somebody can say, okay, it's got to go all the way around. So let's take the Klu Klux Klan example, because now we're going to pressure test it at an extreme. Is that something where grace should be, like, is there a scenario where somebody should say we should show grace to the Klu Klux Klan or somebody like this? Like,
right.
Because on the one hand, I could see, of course not, like, fuck that. Like, they deserve nothing. Like, that's the scum of the earth, all that. I could see somebody logically saying, though, like, but if grace is going to work, it's got to work in all instances, and we got to exhibit it, and that's got to be it. It's got to be that person with the knife and like, hey, I just want to talk.
Yeah.
Then it becomes real. Like, are we willing to go that far? Are we willing to say grace goes that far?
You know, this is the challenge, because this is where you get to, you know, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, right? This is where you get to
talking about superhero level.
These are where you get to these people who, I mean, you know, because, you know, this is where you get a society that, you know, establishes a truth and reconciliation process. You know what I mean? So the best human side of me says yes, that's required, because the idea of abolition is not about, it's about abolishing social systems and structures, but it's also a transformation of human values. And so, yeah, you would have to get to a point where you work towards at least forgiveness in some kind of way. And I think that even if we brought it from back then, like, you know, if we thought about it, what would like a truth and reconciliation process look like for, you know, Klu Klux Klan members and that sort of thing? And I mean, mind you that, you know, I grew up in South Carolina. There's, you know, there's people whose grandparents are still alive right now that like participated in lynchings. They're sitting out there somewhere, you know what I mean? So part of the radical revolution of like values means that you don't forget, you never forget, but the strength, as Martin Luther King in his book, the strength to love, the strength to forgive, as part of that love, it's just, it will usher us into a radically different society and way of being with one another. And so, because what Howard Thurman argues is that without doing that, without operating with a spirit of grace, forgiveness, love, you eat away at yourself too. Right. You can't transform and become your highest self if you can't try to will yourself into forgiving people, because you still hold it with you too.